Over these final few weeks of the regular season, the Chicago Bears have been fielding what looks like a preseason roster out there. Some of the young, unheralded players have been able to take advantage of their expanded opportunities, while others simply haven't.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to your franchise when you enter in our promo code LOCKEDON, in all caps, in the game. On the show today, we look at just how far this Bears roster has come, even just the starting lineup, from week one until now, and how that's left them with, again, what looks more like a preseason team entering week 18, given the injuries and the other changes we've seen across the landscape here. And we'll kind of look at who has taken the most advantage of those opportunities, who has benefited the most from the injuries and the changes that the Bears have made to their roster this season. And we'll also look at the players who maybe haven't been taking as good of advantage as you would have liked to see, and why that might be a red flag for these guys who have seemingly every opportunity in front of them to impress the coaching staff and the fan base as a result. But it's really striking to sort of see how far this Chicago Bears team has come. When you think back to just like what the starting lineup looked like even in week one against the San Francisco 49ers, and think about what this team was supposed to be at the start of the season and what this team looks like now. It's a lot more jarring on defense, but it's worth noting how things have changed a little bit offensively. When you go from, week one, it was like Darnell Mooney and basically Equanimeous St. Brown were kind of your top two starting wide receivers at that point. At some point, you add Chase Claypool into the mix, and now it looks like Claypool is, it's good to go for week 18, but maybe not at full strength based on what we saw. And of course, Darnell Mooney out for the season on injured reserve. So you're seeing a lot of Dante Pettis at wide receiver. Byron Pringle healthy again, but he wasn't available early on to start this season, as was N'Keal Harry at the start of that stretch. So it's a very different looking wide receiving core with a couple of names back in there and a couple of names missing on and off throughout the season. You look on the offensive line, the injuries now at right guard have kind of changed up that spot, but from left to right, it's pretty much the same. Remember back in week one, it was Tevin Jenkins rotating with Lucas Patrick at right guard, and they were trying to find where Patrick could fit with his broken thumb, him now out for the season. Jenkins dealing with another neck injury. Michael Schofield dealing with a knee injury. So maybe Dieter Iceland next in line at right guard there. And week one, their starting right tackle was Larry Borum, not Riley Reif. And that's another one of the changes you look to on the offense. Of course, Fields and Montgomery and Kmet, kind of the same guys at the rest of the skill positions there offensively. But defensively, like across the board, you really only see right now a couple of the same starters that we saw from week one. You got Justin Jones on the defensive line, Nick Morrow at linebacker, and then Jaquan Brisker for sure at strong safety, and Kyler Gordon was the starting slot cornerback from week one. So it's kind of those four guys as your true week one starters that are still part of this defense, because Al-Qadim Muhammad started at defensive end. He's not really a starter anymore, but he is in the rotation. But it feels a little bit more like he's been benched up to this point. Your other defensive end, of course, Robert Quinn, traded before the trade deadline. He's out of the picture there. Your other defensive tackle was Angelo Blackson back in week 1, your starting nose tackle. We've since seen him get benched and be a healthy scratch. We saw him return to the lineup against Detroit all of a sudden, but didn't play particularly well, and we're not sure if he's going to get another chance to. But for a while there, he was out of the lineup, and it's really Armand Watts who's been the other true starter at defensive tackle, but Mike Pennell Jr. has also been in the mix there. So it's really Justin Jones feels like the only true defensive line starter from week 1 that's still in the starting lineup, and the other 3 guys have been around and have been rotating, but now it's really other guys entrenched in the starting lineup. Of course, taking at linebacker, the Roquan Smith trade, and it kind of just leaves Nick Morrow. And I guess Matthew Adams was your number 3 linebacker at that time. But even your Roquan Smith replacement in Jack Sanborn, injured and out for the season. So it feels like Morrow feels like the only one of the true starting linebackers there, although Adams was around at the beginning and was also injured then in that process and came in and out. And now your secondary, Jalen Johnson, injured reserve, Eddie Jackson, injured reserve, Kyler Gordon, injured reserve. 3 of your secondary starters no longer in the mix. Brisker was a starter from week 1. Gordon was more of a slot guy and playing more outside now as a result of the injuries they've had at those positions. But brand new starters in Jalen Jones and Josh Blackwell at the cornerback spots. And of course, DeAndre Houston-Carson, a familiar face there. So it really feels like 3 or 4 defensive starters of guys who were for sure starters in week 1 that are really still starters and playing significant snaps in week 18. And that's about it. 7 guys have had varying amounts of changeover. Some benched, some traded, some injured that have really swept through that side of the ball. And on offense, a couple of changes on the offensive line and a receiving core that's missing a lot of its top talent. And all of that leaves you with what feels like a preseason starting lineup heading into this Minnesota game, depending on what they decide to do, even health-wise. Now with Justin Fields' status up in the air, and I'm still... If I had to place money on it, I'm guessing Justin probably won't play against the Vikings, but that's more of a hunch or an intuition than anything else, but just trying to read between the tea leaves of what the Bears have said and what you're sort of hearing people around the organization say. It feels like that could be the case. And if Peterman starts this game, it's really going to feel like a preseason matchup for this team. But like the preseason, there's a lot of opportunities then for backups and younger players that wouldn't normally otherwise be in there to get those opportunities to show what they can do and try and take advantage of every opportunity that they might have in this game. We'll look at some of the guys who have been the biggest beneficiaries late in the season from injuries, trades, benchings, and other changes to the starting lineup on this Bears team next on Locked On Bears. We're really excited about our new partnership with our friends at Ultimate Football GM. It's a mobile app that's really a lot of fun, and I find myself playing it pretty much every single day. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL general manager and managing your own football franchise, this game is definitely for you because you manage every strategic aspect of your team. You play through the season, you lead your team to glory, and then, of course, you're hiring and firing coaches and coordinators. You're trading players, you're signing free agents, you're making draft picks, you're setting ticket prices, you're working with sponsors and upgrading facilities and managing, your team's finances, all in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free, and you can play it offline. So you can play on the go as you want, when you want to. It's a lot of fun, and I can't stop playing it myself. Locked On Bears listeners are going to get a 100% free boost to your franchise when you use our promo code Locked On inside the game's store. That's all caps, Locked On. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. An important part of the team building process here is finding some of those younger players that can grow and develop and outplay the expectations we might have had for them at the start of the season. Sometimes it takes the injury or the trade or the benching to give this guy the opportunity to come in, show what he could do, and impress you and maybe become a longer-term piece than just a backup who's here on a one-year deal to fill in for wherever the Bears need him to. We haven't seen a guy on this Bears roster really, really shine in that way, right? There hasn't been a breakout star, a diamond in the rough, out of nowhere, all of a sudden looks like an absolute. So I guess Jack Sanborn was kind of that, but now he's hurt, so he's no longer really in the mix there. He would have been right in this conversation as far as guys who weren't getting an opportunity prior to trades and injuries, got the opportunity and really, really shined. But other guys have been able to take advantage, certainly to much, much lesser degrees. One that I don't think stands out right away as a guy who's taken advantage of his opportunities, but I think it's worth noting that statistically, wide receiver Equanimeous St. Brown is 1 catch and 8 yards away from a career best season. He's got 20 catches for 320 yards this season and a touchdown. It's not a great stat line. He has not been very good. He's not been good enough for the Bears. The Bears have needed more and better from Equanimeous St. Brown. But it's also a true statement that he's 1 catch and 8 yards away from a career high in catches and receiving yards. And that's something. That represents some even small amount of progress in him being in a bigger opportunity and being able to at least do something with it. We'll get to some of the guys that haven't been able to do stuff with their opportunity, but not to give away the secret here, but there are other wide receivers on this roster that have also had bigger opportunities and are not even at that 320-yard mark that Equanimeous St. Brown is. He is outproducing many of the other wide receivers on the Chicago Bears this season. Outside of Darnell Mooney, he is number 2 on the team right now among wide receivers. He's technically 3rd in total receiving yards behind Cole Kmet, but ahead of everybody not named Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet on this team. EQ, again, not to say he's been great and it deserves a big contract or anything like that, but he is having close to and likely going to reach a career year, assuming he plays this last game against the Minnesota Vikings. We've also seen, more recently in the last couple of games, on the offensive line, Dieter Iserland getting opportunities because of the injuries at guard. This is a guy who I don't think we've seen in a regular season game. If he has, it's been special teams and occasionally a snap here or there. But he's gotten some extended opportunities in the rotations at guard, given the injuries to Tevin Jenkins and now Michael Schofield. Don't think he really gets those opportunities without it. And this is not to say he's been stellar by any means. He was particularly bad this last week against the Detroit Lions. Seemed a little bit more steady in the previous games that way, but just a guy benefiting from some of the injuries we've seen on this offensive line. Similar thing defensively in the secondary. We've talked about Joshua Blackwell a couple of times, filling in as the slot cornerback. He had some real flashes in that first game against the Green Bay Packers where he got his first big call-up opportunity there, and I thought, there was something there. He certainly hasn't been stellar. This is not a, Bryce Callahan, Thomas Graham type of emergence from him, but it is a player that was exclusively a special teams player, playing very, very well on special teams, getting an opportunity to show more of what he can do on defense that I just don't think he would have otherwise gotten because there were so many players ahead of him on the depth chart. And it's the kind of thing that can add value to him and his career, that he can show teams, yes, I'm not a starting caliber slot cornerback, but I am a starting caliber special teams player who can step in on the field in the slot and not be such a complete liability that teams just attack me over and over and over again. He's missed a few tackles on defense, but I don't think he's been burned or beaten consistently badly in coverage in a way that really scares you from him getting defensive snaps and growing even more in the future. I think the extra playing time has also been super, super beneficial for somebody like Dominique Robinson. Another one of these guys that doesn't have the sacks, doesn't even have a lot of the production in other ways of measuring pass rush. But we knew that coming in, Dominique Robinson was a raw defensive end prospect who's only been playing the position for a couple of years in his entire football career. So he's just been a guy that needs snaps. And we weren't sure at the start of the season how many snaps he was going to get because you had Robert Quinn and you had Al-Qadim Muhammad and you had Trevis Gibson in front of him on the depth chart as well. And so it was okay, he's kind of number 4 and he's pretty raw. Are the Bears going to give him a ton of opportunities to be on the field? And early in the season, he's playing, 18 snaps in the game, 21 snaps in the game, 28 snaps, 17, 21, 20. And now he's playing 54, 49, 39, 47 snaps a game. So it's been essentially double the playing time he was getting earlier in the season. He hasn't been winning nearly as much as you'd like in that playing time, but that playing time is how you learn, how you get better, and how you realize that, oh, hey, in the NFL, I need more than one go-to pass rush move, and I'm going to need more than one counter for each of those go-to pass rush moves. And I think even though he's been struggling, it's still good learning opportunities for Dominique Robinson. And I'll even throw in a quick one. The veteran Justin Jones also hasn't had the sack production or the pass rush production in total, but the Bears have been playing him more at the 4-3 defensive end spot instead of the 3-technique defensive tackle spot. And he's been able to show some versatility there that I think the next time he becomes a free agent, teams can look at him and think, okay, maybe he's not just a 3-technique defensive lineman, but can play maybe 5-technique end in the 3-4 scheme, or even outside the edge rusher spot in a pinch like he has for the Bears. Not that he's been great there, but he's been able to show off a little bit more of what he's capable of beyond just 3-technique lineup and attack downhill. So some of these guys have really benefited and gotten a lot more opportunity to grow and develop as a result of these injuries. There are other guys that we expected to see more because of these injuries and expected to see them do more because of these injuries, and we just haven't really seen it take shape in the way that we were hoping for. We'll look at some of the guys who haven't been able to make the most of their injury and trade and lineup change advantages next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. You can identify then those candidates that you like on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, we've seen more opportunities for a lot of different young players on the Bears. There are other players that when you look at it, you're like, wait a minute, wow, I guess we haven't really seen very much of him. And been kind of disappointed when you take a step back and like, wow, yeah, we really should. Like, this is the time. They have the injuries. They're losing games anyway. This would be the time for this player to step up and take advantage of this opportunity that might be in front of them. And it just really hasn't happened that way. And we haven't seen some of these players take the kind of step we'd be looking for them to take given the opportunities in front of them. I think the one that stands out the most to me are on the offensive line with Alex Leatherwood, a guy that's been practicing at tackle and guard, a guy that they gave rotational opportunities to and kind of put in the starting lineup there or played starter-style snaps and was rough, real rough, and back on the bench and back as a healthy scratch to where, they're playing Dieter Iselin over him at guard. The undrafted rookie from a couple of years ago is outplaying or getting better and more opportunities, and I guess outplaying the former first-round pick from a couple of years ago. And it's really been disappointing that someone like Alex Leatherwood hasn't been able to break into the lineup and at least play well enough to stay in the lineup. I mean, we know he's not going to come in and be a shutdown tackle at this stage of his career, but he hasn't been able to even be active on game day the last couple of games, despite being healthy. That seems like a pretty major red flag there. And you kind of have to throw Larry Borom in this discussion a little bit too, just in the sense that they were also having him practice at guard, and he hasn't been able to beat out Riley Reif at this stage. He hasn't been able to beat out Dieter Iselin for guard snaps. He only played guard when Whitehair was also hurt, and they just needed to get another body out on the field who is healthy. But other than that, I mean, Borom was your week 1 starter at right tackle, and no, he was not great. And yes, he's needed to develop and grow, but it's been surprising that we haven't seen Larry Borom earn his way back into the starting lineup, just because there has been in the past a lot to like about the flashes Larry Borom has shown us, and certainly the jury is not out on what his NFL career is going to be, but it's not a good sign that despite the injuries and changes on the offensive line, he has not been able to reestablish a spot in that group. One other offensive player I want to throw in here. It's a little bit different than the others because he's not playing now and won't really play much the next couple of games. But while Khalil Herbert was out, it's important to note how disappointing Treston Ebner was. It was a real opportunity for him to surprise and impress us as, yes, a rookie 6th-round pick, but an explosive player that I think we were excited to see what he could do with the ball in his hands and wondered if maybe in a loose rotational basis he might have a role in this Bears offense. And we saw how Ebner could do very little to nothing on offense. He's had some special teams opportunities, but as an offensive player, as a running back, wasn't able to take advantage of that opportunity when Khalil Herbert was hurt. And that's a red flag. It's not an omen. It's not a doom for his whole career, but a slow start for him certainly is something that we're not super thrilled about. How about at wide receiver? We talked about Equanimeous St. Brown, how he certainly hasn't thrived with his opportunity, but is at career high levels, albeit a very low bar to secure there. But it's more like, for me, it's comparative. It's like Equanimeous St. Brown is your second leading wide receiver on the team, which signals that Dante Pettis has not been able to really do much with the opportunities the Bears have given him. He's played in 16 games this season, and he has 17 catches for 226 yards, 3 touchdowns, but basically a catch a game. Not that we were expecting him to be a 1,000-yard receiver, but it was like they amassed this weird group of hodgepodge wide receivers, hoping someone would step up and play better than we thought they would, and none of them have. And Pettis has particularly not taken advantage of that opportunity. Same thing for N'Keal Harry. He's had a lot of injuries in and out of the lineup, so I'm willing to sort of give some of a pass there, but there have also been games, there are other games where I feel like he was pretty sure we remember him being a healthy scratch for some opportunities this season. Still has 109 yards on 6 catches, but just not able to take advantage of all the injuries at wide receiver, right? With Mooney out and Claypool out and now just limited, all the time in the world for Byron Pringle to step up in that role, for Dante Pettis to step up in that role, for somebody to step up and make an impact at wide receiver, and really none of them have. And Equanimeous St. Brown has at least hit career best thresholds that are super, super low. But Byron Pringle's been a disappointment. Chase Claypool also been a disappointment so far, but very early in his Bears career. Those two guys, Byron Pringle and Claypool, at least have better excuses of Claypool coming in here late and having to learn on the fly and also now dealing with an injury. And Byron Pringle was hurt on and off a couple of times this season too, and it's been a little bit slow for him to really kind of amass in this offense. But it's hard to believe Pringle only has 9 catches in 10 games this season. For how much we saw him flash in Kansas City, that's been a pretty big disappointment. And then I want to be careful with this on defense, but does it feel to you like we're seeing Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker take advantage of and grow over these last few games of the season? I don't want to be alarmist. I don't want to make it seem like they've been terrible or that we should be super concerned about what we've seen from them. But you know, Brisker's had some really rough plays in run defense the last couple of games. Hasn't really made those impact plays in coverage in a number of weeks this season. Kyler Gordon has had some flashes here, but then a really bad penalty against the Lions. And, you know, again, hasn't made he has the interception that kind of came right into his hands, and he's made a couple of nice pass breakups. Like, it's not to say neither of these guys has done nothing, but I don't know. I was just hoping for a little bit more development late in this season. Their opportunities have not grown because of injuries. They've been the same the whole time. And I'm willing to say even more so that actually the injuries have made their opportunities harder because not having Eddie Jackson next to Brisker makes life a little bit more difficult. Not having Jalen Johnson opposite Kyler Gordon, I think also makes life a little bit more difficult for them. So I'm willing to cut them some slack, not only because they're rookies, but also because the injuries around them in the secondary, I think, make their jobs more difficult. As opposed to some of the guys we talked about on offense where the injuries around them and trades and stuff give them the real opportunity to shine, whereas Gordon and Brisker have had their opportunities to shine all season, and those opportunities become more difficult as the team around them gets worse. So that's why I said I want to be careful with those guys, but I think it's worth at least worth acknowledging that maybe we've been disappointed. I don't know, that even feels a little bit harsh, but just, I don't know, we were hoping for a little bit more, right? Maybe that's unfair expectations, but we just want something defensively that we can point to and say, oh yeah, that's going well for this Bears defense, because you're not really finding it anywhere else. Still got one game to see how all these young guys and guys getting extra opportunities to see how they can do with one last chance to put some tape out there for the Bears and the rest of the league to see. We will break down this Bears-Vikings matchup with our Crossover Thursday podcast coming tomorrow here on Locked On Bears. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast or on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. If you're looking for your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I filled in on today's Locked On NFL podcast with Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jaguars. First of all, Tony is one of my favorite hosts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. He's hilarious, he's smart, he's witty, he's fun, and I love talking to him on and off of the air. But we use the whole podcast to talk more about Damar Hamlin and specifically where things kind of go from here. The injury, of course, he suffered in the Buffalo Bills game, and how the league should handle this, and whether the league is incentivized to handle this or whether the league can just brush this under the rug and hope that people forget about it and not have to worry about the consequences of something like this. It's not as fun of a football conversation, but I think it's an important thing to keep that conversation around that young man going. And Tony and I had that on today's Locked On NFL podcast. So go check that out wherever you're listening to Locked On Bears right now. Then come on back tomorrow for our Crossover Thursday, Locked On Bears, Locked On Vikings right here. And of course, you got to come back for your next opportunity to bear down.